In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to digitally ink and color this drawing here, okay? And I'm going to be uploading two files to your D2L. One is this drawing file, okay? And it's going to be a JPEG. It's called Mouse Clock Drawing. And then I'm going to be uploading the completed version as a JPEG. And this is just to show you what it can look like, so you can look at it while you're working. Also, you can use it to turn in, and I'm going to show you how to do this. We're going to actually take this image and we're going to make swatches from it, okay? And this is actually the completed image that was done in Photoshop. This is the completed image done in Procreate, okay? And the thing is, I'm going to switch back and forth here. They're just subtle differences in them, okay? But you could actually create this exercise in Procreate, okay? And Procreate has just been updated. They've got some new brushes, which are awesome. The other thing, too, is that the problem with Procreate that I've always had was with scaling and rotating things, because when you used to do that, it was always jagged, and as far as the edges, it just looked horrible. Now they fixed that, and so it's awesome. And to me, I love working in Procreate because I don't have to be sitting in front of a computer. I can be sitting in my big easy chair watching a movie. If I'm sitting at work, I like to use Photoshop because I'm sitting in front of a screen, okay? Or if I'm down in my studio, I'm using Photoshop. But this tutorial, I want you to understand, is specific to Photoshop, and there are some things in this tutorial that you can learn from. That I'm going to be talking about paths for one thing, and how to do swatches. But if you're doing this in Procreate, please watch this tutorial so you know how to build this thing, because we need to know how to build it in different layers, okay? And you can have this on in the background while you're working, okay? So first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to download this image, okay? And you'll open it up in Photoshop or Procreate. And when you do, what we want to do is we want to lower the opacity on this thing. So right now I'm in Photoshop, so in order to do that, right now my layer is locked. It's a background layer, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unlock it, so now it's layer 0. And we're going to lower the opacity on this thing right here, okay? Now, typically when I work in Photoshop, one thing I do is if you go to your settings and we go to transparency and gamut, I typically have the grid size off. Now, if you're working on a computer, you'll see this. And, I've heard from some students, they love having this, so they know, that, they're working on a transparent background. Personally, I don't like it, and that's why I always turn it off. And the way we turn it off is going back to settings, going transparency and gamut, and setting this to none, okay? And therefore, we still have a transparent background, it's just that we're seeing a white background. As far as the type of settings I have for Photoshop right now, I am using the Essentials default settings, okay? And you may want to set if you're working in Photoshop, you may want to set that to this, okay? So like I said, we're going to lower the opacity. I've lowered it to about 30. We could go take it down to 30 here, okay? And the first thing we're going to do is make a new layer on top of that, and that you would do the same in Procreate, because you want to make a layer on top of your drawing. And then we'll zoom in here, and we're going to get our brush tool. So B is the keyboard shortcut for brush. Now, here's the deal. I have my brushes already loaded, and I'm going to bring up my brushes. They're usually located up under your window. You can go to brushes, okay? And I am using Kyle's manga brushes, okay? This guy named Kyle Webster made all these brushes, and you can actually get them here. I'm going to show you two. First of all, I'm going to upload these to our D2L, so you'll have brushes up there. But typically, if you're working on Photoshop and you need more brushes, if you go to get more brushes, it will bring up a screen like this. And I don't know why they do this, where you go by and everything. But if you go down lower here, here are the brushes, okay? And so what you would typically do is you would download, like if you wanted to get the manga brushes, I'm going to download them, have a set for you so that you don't have to go through this. But anyway, you would download those, and then you would come and open those up. And by double clicking, see, I made another set of manga brushes. I'm going to delete those. But anyway, you can find that file, and I'm just going to go out here to my desktop for just a second here. And if we go into our downloads, you'll see it there, and you double click that, and it will automatically bring those into Photoshop for you, just to let you know that, okay? And so any set of brushes you want to upload to Photoshop, if you double click them, you'll see the abbreviations ABR. That's the type of file for these brushes. If you double click it, it'll automatically bring them into Photoshop for you, okay? So let's go back into Photoshop, and I'm going to use this, and let me see, I've got so many brushes, sometimes it's hard to find. I'm going to go and look for the smoothie brush, okay? And let's see, there's the smoothie brush. I like this brush a lot because it does a nice job of inking. It kind of has a nice, and I'll just draw a line here. I'm going to turn my, I'm going to paint with black as far as my inking. And see, it makes a nice kind of thick and thin, so it has a little point at the beginning and a little point at the end. And what we're doing is we're going to ink this thing, and you want it to well, first of all, I'm just going to go around here and talk about inking. One thing about inking you want to do is this: it needs to look deliberate. We don't want to be sketching. Okay, you could do that sometimes. But typically, that's left for when you're drawing and you're doing a sketch. But when you ink, it needs to be deliberate, okay? Now, the other thing, too, is I want to talk about, and I'm just kind of rolling along here as I'm drawing here, is it's always kind of important to think about your thickness of your line. And so I'm starting off with a pretty thick line here, and this is for the exterior. And for anything on the interior, I'm going to just make my brush smaller. And the way we do that in Photoshop is we go over to our brackets on our keyboard, and the left bracket key, and this is next to the P key, okay? If you look at your keyboard, you see your P key, you'll see a left bracket. If you click on that a couple of times, it makes the brush smaller, okay? And I don't want to make it that small. I'm going to just go click it once. If you click the other bracket here, the right bracket makes it larger. So, if you want a much larger brush, you do this. You want a smaller brush, do that. Okay. Also, these are pressure sensitive. If you're using a Wacom tablet or using a Cintiq, it's the more pressure you put down, the thicker it's going to get. And I'm trying to go down a little bit smaller because typically what we want to do is we want thicker lines on the outside, and those are called containment lines. Okay. And those help to bring our focus, so that if we're looking at a character or a figure or whatever, depending upon the thickness there, it just really helps to pull them out of the background. And so that's why I like to do the thinner lines on the inside. And there's all different methods of inking, And my advice to you when you're working on your project for this, because we're going to be doing a children's book illustration. That's why I've got this little mouse standing on a clock. We're going to be doing a children's book illustration, and I'm not going to dictate how you ink it. It needs to be inked, but it's a good idea to go and find some artists you like as far as their inking style. Okay, and I think it's so important because studying other artists is very crucial. Now, what I'm going to do is let's zoom in here, and we'll work on the sneakers here. So this is a pencil drawing that I actually created in Procreate using one of the new pencil brushes, and it does a really nice job. And the thing is that I'm going to go around the outer area here and try to do a nice thicker line here. Now, I hit Command Z a lot. Command Z will undo in Photoshop, and what I've set my settings at, because I was having a problem. I hit Command Z and then I hit Command Z a second time and it doesn't do anything the second time. And I work at school, and when I hit Command Z over and over again, it keeps taking things away, which is awesome. It keeps undoing. So I figured out today what you want to do if you go into your Photoshop and you want to go into your keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to look for, let's see, we got copy merge, okay. So undo is set to F1 because I did step backwards, and step backwards is using your histories palette. I set that to Command Z. So therefore, every time I hit Command Z, it's going to step backwards. And this is very crucial here because that's what it's doing here. And it's so cool because I don't have to do Shift Option Z to do step backwards now. And it's awesome. So anyway, let me just continue inking around here. And like I said, you want a nice, deliberate line. It can be a little wavy in areas. But I'm trying to do all the thicker lines on the outside here, and I've got several different versions of this inked, so we'll be going into that in just a moment here. Let me just zoom in here so we can see this better, and I'm going to actually undo that part right there. And that's one of the things I do like about Photoshop is undoing. Having a keyboard that you can hit Command Z on. And that's one thing that Procreate doesn't have, okay? Because, maybe it does have keyboard shortcuts. I just don't know. I never use a keyboard with Procreate. And I want to try to make these lines on the inside just a little smaller. And this is for the shoelaces. And they don't always have to connect up. But we're going to try to do a nice, clean job. And also, a lot of times, you'll have a drawing and you're having to interpret what those lines are. And so when you're inking, you have to make decisions. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're working in Procreate, I want you to listen to this, because I think it's so important, because you are trying to make decisions upon what you are looking at and trying to interpret what the drawing is. Even if you've done the drawing, you may realize, oh, I should have added more detail in my pencil drawing. But now we're working, and so we're going to have to make some interpretation of that. And in the comic book industry, they have pencilers and inkers, and then colorists. And right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a straight line through like this, because I want a nice clean line going there, and then I'm going to erase out, okay, like that. But anyway, back to what I was talking about with the color inking and the colorist. So there are some comic book artists that actually draw, ink, and color their work, and those are few and far between. But if you're working in the comic book industry, if anyone's working in the comic book industry, you're typically the illustrator is the penciler, okay, and they do all the pencils. Now, if you're doing a children's book, usually it's one artist, and they're doing everything. So. And not all children's books are inked. I'm just trying to interpret this line right here. And maybe we could always go back onto a line and clean it up like this. This is going to be a little jagged because I already have a version of this. And like I said, you want to do a nice clean drawing here. So I went back over like this to make it a little thicker. You could do that. Okay. We just don't want it to be, sketchy like that. Okay. That is the key here. So I'm going back around on this side, and we're going to interpret this. And DC came out with this great series of books. I think they're called Batman Unhinged. I've got them on my bookshelf. I haven't looked at them in a while. And what they are is they're the complete, they're graphic novels. So it's a series of comic books put together, and they're all in pencils. There's no inking. They've got the dialogue boxes, which is awesome, so you can read them, but you get to see what the penciler, the illustrator did, the artist, their work without the inks, without the colors, and they're really cool to look at. And if you ever have a chance to see one, you should take a look at them. I don't know if the school library has any of those, um, but I've got like about 4 different versions of those, where Jim Lee is doing some of the inking, or drawing, that is, and his pencils. They just look incredible. Anyway, let me just keep working here. Now, one of the things you want to do is, I keep undoing this, is trying to get a nice clean line. There we go. I like that line. That's much better. And like I said, I've already inked this once. I think this about 3 or 4 times now. And, just as practice. And that's, even if you know what you're doing, I think it's a good idea, because, with inking, it is a skill. It's good to practice that skill, so you get better with your inking. So it's much more natural. If you're new to it, it's going to be a little hard first, but you'll get used to it. I'm just going to keep going here. I'm just, like I said, I'm just yapping away as I'm drawing, and eventually I'm just going to cut away to the next one here. And, we can always zoom out. Now, one thing I would recommend is, when you're working on this, it's a good idea to turn off the drawing layer to see what it looks like, okay? And to see if there's anything you want to correct here. Like, maybe I might want to correct this shoe here. And, because I was not really happy with the way that came out. We can use an eraser, okay? That's one of the big benefits to working digitally that you can't do traditionally, is, there's some great people who could do, I'm trying to say there's some great inkers who work traditionally. That's what I'm trying to say here. And, their work is beautiful. And I have inked traditionally. I like doing it. It's fun. The only problem is the erasing. You can white out stuff, okay? And there's whiteout. There's different types of whiteout you can use. There's opaque paint you can use to correct things. But, when you're working digitally, you can always just, fix things like that. And it makes it so much easier. Okay, so I'm going to keep going here. And make my brush just 1 step larger here. And I'm just kind of interpreting this. In Photoshop, you can rotate the canvas. And I haven't really needed to do that yet. And this is up under if you go to your toolbars and you're using Essentials, you'll see the hand tool, and then R is the rotation tool. And, you can rotate your canvas so that it might make it easier to do the inking depending on what you're trying to ink, okay? So we might be wanting to do this thing here, this part of his little snout here. And I want to try to do a little thinner line in the inside there. And I'm just kind of keeping it rotated. Now, if you want to go back to what it was originally, you just go over here to the grabber hand and double click it, and it takes it right back. Okay? And that is key here. And because sometimes you may need to work in Photoshop, depending, if you're working at a studio, for instance, they might be working in Photoshop. And anyway, I've had students in my concept art class who use their iPads, and the next thing you know, they forgot to bring their charging cord, and then they switch over to Photoshop. And I think it's important to know how to work in both, because, like I said, there's things in Photoshop that Procreate can't do, because it's got so many more features. All right. So anyway, let me just kind of continue on here. We're almost done here. Anything like this, like we'll zoom in here. We'll do his eye. And then we'll color it in. Now in Procreate, you can always drag the color in there. In this program, you can use the paint bucket, but I don't like the way the paint bucket does, because it doesn't do a good job, and I don't even know exactly where my paint bucket's at, because I've looked before. Where is it? There's my paint bucket. It's up under here. It's G is the keyboard shortcut, but I think it would be Shift G because you got the gradient tool there. But if I do the paint bucket like this, notice these little white lines, and yeah, you can maybe adjust the settings, but I hardly ever use the paint bucket, What I'll usually do is I'll circle something with the lasso tool, and then I do Alt Delete, and that's something we'll be doing later as we create this. And so I just want to work a little bit more here. And I'm going to kind of jump around on this. The hardest part here to me is this. Now in Procreate, if we draw a curve like this and hold down, it will actually straighten it out. And sometimes I'm working in Photoshop and I'm trying to do it, and I have to realize, oh yeah, Photoshop doesn't do that. Because in Procreate, if you keep pressing, you can edit your curve, which I think is awesome. It just makes something easier. But there is something that we're going to be working with soon here that I'm going to show you, and that is paths. So this tail's not going to be identical just because of that line there, unless I go back here. Let me go back here. Now I'm just going to talk for a second here. And that is, oops, I went too far back. Let me go to my histories palette here. And yeah, there. That one, okay. All right, so what I was going to say is, and the reason why I'm doing this over again is, typically, when you ink something, if you do it traditionally, you have to kind of stop yourself, or if you have something like a piece of paper over this area. But what I would suggest doing is trying to get a good clean line like that by following through. Oh, I like that one. Okay, now I'm going to keep that one, and we'll just have to deal with the end of the tail here. And I'm going to come in and erase out, because you get a nice cleaner line like this. Now the other thing too, sometimes what I'll do is I'll do different layers, so I don't have to go. So when I'm erasing, I don't have to be so precise with my erasing. I can erase quickly. Okay, so like I said, when we're drawing, it's interpreting, and we can interpret this so that tail gets a little smaller on the end there. And then I'm going to try to get this here. Now, typically what I try to do is, when I'm drawing and inking, I think it's good to look ahead. So instead of looking where your pen is at, you look here, and then as you get to there, you look farther down. And that will actually help you get a cleaner line like that, okay? And that's just a practice I've learned over a period of time. Also, pulling instead of pushing. As you see, a lot of times I'm pulling the brush. Anyway, that's not bad. I actually have a version of this already kind of more completed here, okay? And the reason why I do that is so I can go on to the next stage in this tutorial. So we don't spend all the time, having to do everything like I did with the Thelma and Louise poster, which didn't take too long to do. But anyway, what I want to show you next is, in Procreate, if you want to draw a straight line, you just draw a line and hold down, and it becomes straight, okay? I'm actually going to make a new layer here for the clock. No, I don't want to delete that. Let's make a new layer. We'll put up underneath here, and we'll call this, first of all, I'll name this one. It's good to name your layers, too. We'll call this mouse ink, okay? And then we'll do clock ink. And on my other ones here, I've called them different things here. I call them line art, okay? Because that's what it is. It's line art. But we'll just call it ink just to abbreviate that. So we're going to do this on a different layer. And one of the things, like I said, is good to draw through here. And as I said, if I was in Procreate, I could do this, and it makes a nice straight line, as I hold down here. And we could try to get a nice line like this. You can also use this tool in Photoshop, and that is the line tool, okay? So I'm going to use the line tool first, just to draw a line here to show you. And I have it set for 8 pixels, okay? And that's not bad. I think when you're inking something, you can start anywhere. I started with the mouse because I found that when I started with the clock and I made the outside line too thick, then I have to really thicken up the mouse line to kind of compensate. So I do the mouse first, and then I'm doing the clock second. And again, what we want to talk about is doing kind of a containment line. And a containment line is a thicker line around the exterior of an object. And as you can see with this clock, it's got a much thicker outline around this shape here, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool in Photoshop. And that's one of the benefits to using Photoshop here. And we're going to set this to a path. So up here under pen, you can set it to a path or a shape. We want this set to a path. And we're going to just draw this shape here. Now, the paths work very similar to Photoshop. You click and you drag and you get a curve like that. Now, the only difference is in order to delete that second handle, if you go back to that point, it's not going to do it. You have to hold down your Alt or Option key and then click, and it will delete the second handle. So that's the main difference between the pen tool in Photoshop versus Illustrator, okay? So let's just go through here. We're going to go straight through like this and straight through like that. And then we need to go over to our Paths palette. Now, if you have your Essentials, I have my workspace set up for Essentials, and it brought everything, and I reset it so it looks like it, you would first, as if you first opened it. I'm going to go to the Paths palette, which is located up under you got layers and channels, and then you got paths. Anytime you make a path, it's called a work path. And the best thing to do is it's best to double click it so you name that path. And we could call it path 1, or we can call it clock body, because if I've got a few paths, I just don't name them, But if I have if I have 50 paths, then I want to start naming them. And I've had artwork where I've had that many paths before. And with a path, you can do multiple things here. One is you can turn it into a selection. I don't know how much of a selection it's going to turn it into because it's not a closed path. But as you can see, it turned out into a selection by clicking down here. And we'll be doing that with another shape here in just a moment. So I'm going to undo that. But what we can do is we can stroke it. Now, when you stroke it, it's important that you get off your pen tool and hit your B key. Okay, so I hit the B key, the brush turns up, and it's whatever brush I'm using, and this is the Manga Smoothie brush. Okay, and so I'm just going to hit this stroke button all the way down here at the bottom. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up out of here, so in case you're having trouble seeing what I'm doing here, I'm going to pull my Paths palette out because that's one of the problems with doing these tutorials is sometimes it's hard to see what's going on down here. So anyway, this is the button here, which will stroke that path, and it'll stroke it to whatever brush you're using. Okay, and that's not bad. If we need to change it or to undo it, or we can erase out. And I'm going to come in here a little tighter here and move these points like this, and then I'm going to stroke again, okay? And like I said, this is all depending upon our brush. If we go to our brush settings, we can see things like this, okay? Right now, the controls are set to pen pressure. I'm going to see about doing fade here because fade does this. And let's just see what it will do if I set this to fade, okay? And then hit this button. We'll see what, oops. We got to make sure that our path is selected. Okay. Make sure the brush is on, and then click this, and it's like, oh, well, it doesn't like something. Oh, that's because this is set to nothing right now. So let's turn up our fade to, I don't know, let's say 40. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. Okay, I see. You see that's what it's doing here? Let's turn that up to maybe 60. Something like that. Okay. And I'm just playing around here for just a second. Okay. And we'll go back to what we were doing before. All right. So now we're going to stroke it, and it does that. Okay. And we'll just turn, and to get off the path, just to see what we did, we click off of here, and that's the path it drew. Okay, it's a little thicker down here, and it didn't do a very good job of that. Okay, so I'm gonna undo that. Like I said, I'm just playing around here and I'm gonna fade this up to, let's say, 90 or even 100. So it's like that. And let's just see again what happens when I hit this button here. Oh, got to make sure here. I think it wants 99. Is that it? I got 80. There you go, 99. Now let's click it here and then make sure I've got my brush set up, and then let's do it again. Yeah, it's not doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So I'm going to just turn this back to pin pressure here. And I'm going to play around with this just a little bit more later on. But, all I got to do is click this button, and it does a nice job of stroking that, okay? And we don't want that stroke to be thicker than the mouse outline. So let's take a look here. It's getting pretty thick there. So what I'm going to do is we'll undo that and make sure you got your brush selected by hitting the B key. And then we'll just make the brush a little bit smaller here, and we'll stroke it one more time here. And that's closer to what we needed, okay? So now I will use this as my outline. And it's not as thick as the pencil, which is fine, okay? But by having this, and we'll go back to my layers palette here, on a separate layer, then we can go in and we can erase out these areas right here, okay? Anyway, I was hoping that fade would work better, because yesterday, and I'm going to click off the path here. By the way, if you don't name your paths and you start drawing other paths, you lose them. That's why it's good to save them. But anyway, I was working with a student, and she was watching this tutorial I had done about how to make a chain brush. And we were playing around with doing the stroking here, and we'd set it to fade. And it looked great because we had a chain that was going from thicker chain to a thinner chain. It looked awesome. I was hoping that this would look the same way, but it's the brush settings that I'm using. If I use a round brush, it may do what I want it to do here. Okay, so now we've got this nice clean line here. We can use this line here for these. Okay. I do nice straight lines here. So I'm using just the line tool, because what we want to do is we want the thicker line on the outside, the thinner line on the inside. Now let's go and do these curves here, and let's go and get, let's see, my pen tool again, and that's the polygon. Here's my pen tool. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll draw this curve here first. I might even just draw it all the way around like this, just so it's nice and clean. Now we have to use this selection tool here, and I don't know if I said that before when I was moving points, because there's two selection tools in Photoshop, and one is for shapes and the whole layer and everything. That's this main selection tool up here, and then this is for paths. Okay, and you've got two different types of selection tool. You got a direct selection tool, like what we're using, and you got the path selection tool, so it will select the whole path. So anyway, now I got a nice curve there, and let me get my brush again, and sometimes you can also use just a hard round brush, like this, and I'm making it just a little bit larger here, just to see, and then let's hit this again, and it doesn't do a bad job. I like that, okay? Because it's a nice round brush. I'm curious though, and I shouldn't be experimenting in the middle of a tutorial, but anyway, let's name this clock face. So we save this path because we're going to do another one. I'm curious, what would happen if we go to our brush settings here and change this to fade on that, and I'm just curious what it's going to do here. So let me go back to make sure I'm on the B key and do this. Oh, it's that right there. It doesn't, okay. Yeah, it kind of does it. I don't know. All right, well, I'm going to draw another path just to see here. Sorry about that. All right, so let me get my pen tool again. It does not like something I'm doing. I apologize. Like I said, I should not be experimenting in the middle of a tutorial here. We'll keep this to pen pressure for the moment. All right, but let me get my pen tool. And something is awry. This is the problem with doing a tutorial and experimenting. There we go. Got my brush. There we go. I got my pen. Okay, here we go. So this time I'm going to do this path, and I'm going to play around with that. I'm just curious. I try to know everything before I do a tutorial, but sometimes, I'm in the middle of a tutorial and I start thinking, like, ooh, let's try this. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, okay? All right, so let me get my direct selection tool so we can change that path. We can change this path a little bit. Bring this closer in here. Move my path palette so that I can see my curve better, okay? So I just made a shape there. And I'm going to make this just a little taller here. Okay, so let me go back to my brush. And we're using, now I'm using this hard round brush. I'm just, like I said, I'm just wanting to know, can we do a good fade on this? We'll find out. We didn't name this one. We'll just call it curve. And then we'll just try this one more time. Yeah, it's starting to do that down there. So if we click off of it and let's click off our drawing, you can begin to see it just doesn't do as nice of a job as I was hoping. But it's all depending upon the brush you're using, okay? So anyway, I'm going to undo that. Like I said, I want to play around with that to see what it could do there. And I should have played with around before I started doing the tutorial, okay? So let's just set that up like that, and then we'll go back over here. Oh, don't move around here. And then we'll click this, and I'm going to click off of it just to see what it looks like there. Not a bad job. Okay, now we'll do another line here. And I'm just going to follow through like this, or we can go pull it down this way. And I'm just trying to get a curve there without having to draw a whole curve. All right, we'll just do it this way. We'll zoom in there so we can erase that out better. Now, these Roman numerals, in this file over here, the Procreate file, I actually drew them. And I don't think I did a bad job drawing them, I drew, the 12, and then I drew a 1, and then the 1 I duplicated and made the 2, and then the 12 I duplicated and erased out one of the 1s. So I think it came out pretty nicely here. But what we're going to be doing is, and let's go back here, what we're working on now, is we're going to work on doing Roman numerals here, and we could use the text tool. That's, Procreate has a text tool too you can use. And you can do the same thing here in Procreate. So let's just click here for a moment here. And one of the things we want to look for is in our things, we want to look for, we've got so many fonts on my system. I want to go to serif. We want to pick a serif font. And I think what I did was I picked Botany. And I don't know if I did book. We'll see here. I'm going to type in, I'm going to do caps lock and do X. And let me see if it's working here. Okay. All right, we're going to do X and I. Okay. And though that's not bad. We can make it a little larger here. And we are going to have to turn this into a raster shape here after we get it done here. But what we're going to do is, and I'm sorry, I'm just about to sneeze here, is we need to pull up our palette here, our character palette, and we can actually distort this thing so that it's going to be taller. And I'm going to make this, elongate this somewhat so it looks a little bit more like the drawing there, okay? And like I said, botany seems to work. It's not bad. And once we get that, what we can do is this. We can actually, we'll just duplicate this layer here. So now we've got two of them. Okay. And on this layer, we can come in here with the text tool. And I'm just going to double click this because it's, if you come over to your layer here and double click where it says T, you can actually come in here. It selects it, and then I'm going to do 2, okay? And what I find best is just to kind of bring them down like this, okay? And then we'll duplicate that one and move it up. I'll double click so it's got selected, and then I'll just delete that one. And this one here, we'll go back to their 12. We'll duplicate it one more time here. And we'll take that duplicate and move it down to here. And let's see if I can get inside there. Okay, I'll just double click it here, and we'll just delete one of the ones, okay? So now we've got our text, but what we're going to have to do is, look, we'll start with the 12, okay? And mind you, this was all hand-drawn, so I didn't do a bad job, but I could see here, and if you take a look at my sample version, my, thing that I'm going to give you, this ink and color example, I actually moved this closer here. All right, so I'm just going here. And what we're going to do is, let's take this one here, and we're going to go over to our layers palette. We'll close up. Right now, we're just going to minimize my brushes for the moment. And we can tuck our path back into here, hopefully. Well, maybe it won't go in there. I don't know. There, okay. There it goes. All right, so under layer here, I'm just going to drag everything out here so we can see it up here. And we're going to go to this layer where it has the Roman numeral 12 and click this on here for options. And then we're going to go all the way down here, and we're looking for I saw it yesterday, and now it's disappeared on me. Maybe because that has not selected. Okay, make sure that that's selected. Now let's try this one more time here. Create clipping mask. Nope, don't want to do that. All right, so I deselected it. Now I just got the path selected. And you may be seeing this, and I don't. It's like usually there is rasterized text layer. Now, like I said, I practiced this yesterday, and it worked fine. And right now, it just does not want to do that for the moment. And I'm going to have to see why. Let me go to my character palette here. Okay. No, it should be doing it on the layers. Convert to frame. Blend options. Create clipping mask. Flatten. I don't want to flatten it. And I don't want to animate it. Yeah, now they may have updated this. All right, we can do that up here under type. We've got rasterized type layer, and that's what it does. Now I don't know why it's not on the layers palette like it was yesterday. I'm going to just check this again, see if it says it here. Maybe I'm just overlooking it. Sometimes my eyes don't function the way they should. It's like I'm looking at so many things. No, it's not, I don't see it on there. Okay, so I don't know what's happened between now and yesterday, but we're going to go to type, and we're going to rasterize type layer. We're going to do this for each one of these now that we've got this all set up here. Okay, and type. We're going to do rasterize type layer again. Do it for this one. Okay. So it's just turning these into pixels. That's all it's doing here. So everything now is turned into pixels. So now we can take this one here. And what we're going to do is, on this layer, we're going to hit Command-T. We're on I might be on the wrong layer here. No, it's because I got path. You know what? It may be because of that. All right. I'm going to undo that. Yeah, let's go back here. I'm just curious. I don't care. All right, so So what we got to do is we got to click on where it says the Roman numeral 12, and we just do Command T, and that brings a bounding box around it, and we can rotate it like this, and then we're going to distort it. And the way we distort it, now I just enlarged it. The way we distort it is if you hold down your Command key, you can distort. And that's what I'm doing right now. Is just, and then I'm going to make it so it goes in perspective more like this, and therefore I've got my Roman numeral set up. Okay, and I'm going to do that for each one of these. Okay, hit that one there. We'll go to our next one here. There's this one, Command T, and we'll rotate it. The problem with if you rotate them and then go back to try to do something else, there's a problem, and that is the bounding box will be set differently. So if I go here and then go back to here and then do Command T, the bounding box is different now. Okay, so I won't be able to distort it the same way I was before. So I'm going to go back here, and we'll go back to, let me make sure there we go. Oh. All right. So that's why it's good to rotate them at the same, and rotate and distort at in one setting, in one motion or whatever you call this. So do Command T, and we're on this one right here. Yeah, okay, there we go. And then Command T, and you know what? Some reason it keeps selecting this curve for some reason, and that's why it's not doing what I want it to do. Command T, there we go. All right, so now I'm going to rotate again, and I'm going to distort again. So we're going to enlarge, or actually, I can distort this way. I have to hold down the Command key as I do this. There we go. And fix this to kind of mimic my drawing. It doesn't have to be exact. Okay. We're going to move it up just a little bit more, closer here. And I'm looking at the other one there to see what it looks like. Okay. And hit that. There we go. Okay. Do the same thing for the one. Command T. And I undid this. I undid my 12. Damn. Just sometimes, I don't know how many times I'm going to have to. This is my first attempt on this tutorial, and I'd like to get this tutorial done in one setting and not have to redo it. But you just never know. Things go awry, and experimenting does not help in the middle of a tutorial. All right, so we got that one. Go back to 12. Well, anyway, let me see what I've got coming up here. So I've got one where I've got the clock face done, but I have the hands. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to delete the hands here, and we'll just take those. Let me go into my clock hands, and we'll just do Command A and hit delete. And then I got my paths here, and I'm going to delete those. And I'm going to just show you how to make these, okay? Because now that's why I'm skipping ahead here. Because why should I have to show you how to do each letter once you've seen me do one letter, okay? So let's do Command D here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a path that I just deleted for this. And notice this right here. I have my caps lock down, and when you have your caps lock down, the pen tool becomes this. And this goes for every tool in here. So if you're working and you're going, well, my brush does not look right, it looks like this, it's because your caps lock is on. Okay? Now, so let's continue on here. And I'm going to get my pen tool. And we're just going to draw a shape out like we would in Illustrator. But we have to hold down the Alt or Option key to get rid of that handle. And then we come back and close the path. And then we're going to go and just try, the problem is the drawing is at an angle. And I'm just trying to make this look even. Okay, that doesn't look bad. All right, we're going to get our pen tool again. And we'll go this way. We'll curve it just a little bit. Come back and kill that second handle. Go straight down. And we'll have to fix this, as I can see here. Which is inevitable. So we hit the A key. And the A key brings up our last selection tool, which is the direct selection tool. If you get the main selection tool, you just hit Shift A and it will take you to the direct selection tool. All right, so now we got that part right there. Okay, that's not bad. And it's not, I'm looking at this as, yeah, that's pretty close to what I was planning on doing anyway. Okay, so there's that. And we can maybe bring this in just a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, now we're going to get the pen tool again and draw this shape. Okay, now what we're going to do with these is let's select we're going to select both these shapes right here. We're going to select this shape and this shape. Okay, and then we're going to come up to here. We're going to hit combine shapes, and then we're going to hit merge like that, and so that will turn it into one shape. Now what I want to do is I want to punch a hole using this shape here. So I'm just going to drag over both of these here. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do, I think it's exclude overlapping shape. And then hit merge shapes. Okay, now it's one. Let's call this one clock hand. There we go. And then what we're going to do is hit the selection. And there it turns it all into one selection. And this is just like the Pathfinder tools with what I did right there. So if you need to see that, watch that over again, okay? And now what we're going to do is just fill that with black, but make sure we're on a different layer. We don't want to be on the same layer as the Roman numerals, because otherwise, because those are already pixels there, and we don't want to do that. So we want to make a new layer for it. So we'll do Alt-Delete. Now, Alt-Delete is the keyboard shortcut for filling things in Photoshop, okay? And we can take this one and enlarge it, or I'm going to actually just duplicate this one right here, this path. I'm going to do Command D so that we don't have the selection anymore. We're going to go and get the path selection tool so we can drag the whole thing over here like this. And then we're going to do just Command T, because Command T will actually distort this. And if we hold down our Command key, we can make it thinner if we want to. And we just want to try to get at an angle that's close to what we had before, so it's close to the drawing. And then once we do that, once we like that, we have to hit the check mark or hit the return key. There we go, like that. And then we're going to turn that into a selection and hit Alt-Delete. Whoops. I hit Command Delete. Hit Alt-Delete. There we go. That fills it, okay? And then we do Command D. And now we can go and look at this and turn our drawing off. As you can see, I actually altered it, my Roman numerals from this. And so my Roman numerals are not the same as my drawing. I actually improved it some. And so now we have this. Okay, so once you get to this stage and you get all your inking done, you may be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, you haven't inked these bars back here. Well, they're not bars, for one thing. They're meant to be lines that represent color wallpaper, okay? So, like, if we take a look at this, you can see what it should look like. And one of the reasons why I talk about this for a second is because when you do a drawing, not everything is going to be inked. You know, a lot of times, when you have ink and color, not every color shape needs to have an outline around it. Okay, it's like if you're doing an exterior scene with clouds, clouds look a lot better without outlines around them, and so you could just do cloud shapes that are white. And that's what I'm going to be doing with those shapes right there. That's why I say my inking is already done here. So let's go and just make another layer here, and we'll call this. We'll do this. We'll do it for the clock. Clock body color. Just so we have a name for this that's different. And what I'm going to do is we're going to use my lasso tool for this. And lassoing things is really cool because they can be pretty fast here. And actually, I'm going to use this lasso tool. This is the straight line lasso tool. So we'll go from here to here to here. I'm going to go back here to edit that because I want to talk about the lasso tool. All right, so I'm going to go back to the regular lasso tool here, this one, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and then do a curve, and therefore I have that. Now, before I start coloring here, and if we want to, we could save this selection. We could turn this selection into a path, by the way. I don't know if you knew we could do that. We could make this into a work path, okay? And it will actually turn it into a path. I'm going to undo that. But what I want to do is I want to show you how to make a set of swatches. And so we're going to go to this ink and color example JPEG that I have loaded up and that you're going to be looking at to see how to make yours look similar to this, okay? And what we're going to do is go to Image, Mode, Index Color. And we could type in a number here. I got 15, but let's do 20 just to see, okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to simplify this image. Click OK. You might not see any difference. We'd have to zoom in to maybe see any different. Yeah, there you go. See, it really pixelated that because before it was like this. We'll go back there and do it one more time here. So, mode, index color. Okay. So we're going to turn this into index color. Then what we do is we go to Image and Mode and Color Table. And then we're going to hit Save. And you're going to save it wherever you need to, like on your desktop. We could save it here, okay? And we'll call this, so I actually have one already here. It's an ACT. It's not showing up in there. It's okay. All right, so we'll call this, I don't know, mouse color 1. Dot ACT, okay? And so, and it's not MOUSE, MOUSE. Okay, there we go. All right, now we hit Save. And then click OK. Now we can actually undo what we've done here. We can go back to just having that as opened. But now we have this ACT file, which is, and we'll go back over to what we were working on here, okay? And we're going to go to our swatches. And I've already got mouse art right there. I call it mouse art. I call this one mouse color. But if we, and let's just drag this over here so you can see this better. I'm going to go over to the options here, and I'm going to go import swatches. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and look for this in here. And there it is, mouse color 1. We'll open that. And now we've got color to choose from, okay? And we'll see what kind of colors it gave us. It didn't give us every color in there. And if we want to, we can go back or we can sample off. But this at least gives us a start here. And we're just going to choose one of these browns here. And then make sure we're on the right layer here. We're going to be on this body, clock body layer. And do Alt-Delete. And that fills it. Okay, And it's very simple. Do Command D. Now, once we have that selected there, we can actually lock the pixels. And what that means is if we were to paint a different color, let's say a lighter color like this, it won't paint outside of there, okay? But what I'm going to simply do is I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go and get my lasso tool, my polygon lasso tool, that is, and I'm going to click from here to here and outside of here, like we used to do in Illustrator all the time, and do Alt-Delete, and now it will only fill there. Now, this is pixel lock. It's different from locking the layer. But what it does is lock the pixels so that you can paint inside, which makes it so cool. So that's going to be our first one. And then we're going to do a mouse color. We'll do M-O-U-S-E, color. Okay, so his body color. And we'll maybe use this color right here. And we could lasso it. I like lassoing a lot of times. You can paint, okay? But sometimes I just like doing the lasso tool. We'll go around his hands. And, I've seen artists that will, draw and paint with the lasso tool, which is kind of what we're doing here, okay? And you don't have to use the lasso tool if you don't want to. If you want to use a paintbrush, we can paint with it. But when you do it, here's the deal. We want to make sure that you're painting at 100% flow and opacity. And we haven't even talked about that yet, okay? And we're going to have to talk about that in a moment, because that is so key to painting in Photoshop, okay? So I'm just going to go around. Now, if you get tired, if you're using the lasso tool like I'm doing, you're going, okay, I'm getting tired here. Just go and go back to the original point there, or basically close that off, and then continue on with the lasso tool by holding down your Shift key, and you can do this. Okay, you can just, if you make a mistake and want to take away, hold down your Alt key, and it will take away. Okay, so Shift adds, Alt takes away. And we can always come back in with a paintbrush afterwards too if we need to do any refining. And I'm just trying to be quick here. Actually, I want to do something a little bit more choppy right there. But maybe I'll put the mouse ears on a different layer above it. And there's this little area here. I just keep my hand or my finger on the Shift key at all times. And then we just hit Alt-Delete. And therefore you see what that looks like. And then we can hit Command D, and then we can get our paintbrush here. And we're going to go back to our, let's see, I'm looking for my brushes. They're hidden up under here. Make sure we get the right brush. Now we could just use a hard round brush if we want to. Make sure the spacing's off. Make sure this is set to pin pressure. Turn all that jitter off there. And we can do something kind of like this if we want to. But a lot of times I'll just paint with the last brush I was using, which is Smoothie, like that. And one of the things too is, and so one thing I want to explain is our line art sits on top of our color. That is so crucial here, is that the line art has to be on a layer above the color layer. And I find a lot of students will just they'll do a line drawing and it's all completely closed off, and then they'll fill it by using the paint bucket, and it's just like, you're limiting yourself when you do that, because what we want to do is we want to be able to, first of all, edit each individual color. We want to be able to go back into there, and if you just do a paint bucket drop of color inside of a shape that has been outlined, then it's going to be difficult to select that color, especially once you start shading and everything. Okay, now the other thing too is the benefit to this is, see, all my lines, a lot of them weren't closed off. Okay, and the other benefit to this is if you want to have it looser to where some of the color goes past the outline to make it look more traditional, like, you know, we've made some mistakes here and there, you can do that. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is just kind of clean this up a little bit. All right, so that's my mouse color, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do his hands and everything else. Anyway, I think this kind of gives you a basic foundation for doing this, because I actually have had my color blocks all out like this. Okay, and so I have all these different layers. Let's take a look at them here, because we're getting close to the end here and of our tutorial. So I have layer 4. I didn't name it, but this is mouse. Line art or inking, okay. We've got clock hands. Now what I've done here with the clock hands, by the way, is this. I actually, instead of using black, I used a color. So, and then I duplicated those clock hands and moved them and created a shadow color. Okay, and I used one of these colors over here. So this is one of the benefits to working like this. And now and I actually have drawn out a shape for the shadow, because if we go back here, you know, and we're filling this in, you're going to have to turn some of your color layers off when you're building things. Like especially because you could build these out of order, but like, you know, with this shape right here, this shadow shape, you know, I'm just going to do a quick one. It's not going to look perfect. But see, that shadow shape can be just, it's not going to be outlined. It's just going to be a dark color, you know. And so we can just put that there like that. And so now we turn this back on. So we can turn things off and on as we build our color, okay? And that is so important here. So, like I said, everything has been blocked out except I don't have my lines for my wall. My wallpaper, so we'll just do those, and we can use the lasso tool. We could use the rectangle tool. Actually, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and we're going to make some rectangles here, and I'm going to fill this with, you know, one of these really pale gold colors here. We've got to make a new layer for it, so we'll call this stripes. And then we'll hit Alt-Delete. And then what I'm going to do is, you know, we can keep drawing them out, but I'm just going to duplicate this, okay? And move it. And I'll move it straight over. I'm not going to move it as far over. I'm just going to try to move it over, because we're going to take all these in a moment once I do these. Because there's a couple of ways to do this. You could use the drawing, or you can try to improve the drawing. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. I'm trying to improve the drawing by duplicating these. I'm holding down my Shift key as I drag it over so it keeps it straight over. And I'm looking at the distances between each one of these. Okay. And let's see here. Make one more. And if I'm in Procreate and I go past here, it deletes the color. If I'm in Photoshop, most of the time it won't do that, okay? And I'm hoping it doesn't do that, because sometimes I have to change the setting here. So I'm going to pull this over, and I'm looking at the negative space here. So let's turn this off for just a second here. And I'm looking at all my negative space. Well, it doesn't go all the way down, but that's fine. But let's take all these shapes here, all these stripes, and we're going to merge them. I select them all. I do Command E, which will merge them. Let's turn back my drawing on. And then we'll do Command A, and then Command T. Command A selects everything on that stripes layer. Now we're going to take this, and we're just going to move this in like this. And so these things will look a little bit more equal distance. They'll look more similar, and they're going in perspective. And I just think they'll look better in the long run than if I just, drew with the polygon lasso tool and made, filled them in that way. And now let's turn this on and Command D. Okay, so I got that. Now I want these stripes to fade into the wall. I also want the wall to get lighter here. So first of all, let's make the wall a little lighter. I'm going to pick one of the lighter colors off of this. And I'm going to just use a soft round brush. Let me go over to my brushes. And I'm going to go all the way up here to our general brushes and use a soft round brush, okay? I'm going to make this thing really big here. And I want this to kind of have a pebbly texture, kind of like spray paint, and you've got that in Procreate. But, in Photoshop, if we use Dissolve, and then we're going to lower the opacity. I'm going to lower the opacity, because right now everything is set to 100% flow and opacity. And I want to explain this for a moment here. So opacity is, how opaque a color is. And so we can lower that here. We can also just type in numbers. If we type in, let's say, 3, oops, let me just hit enter there. If we type in 3, it turns it to 30, okay? Flow is how fast that color is coming out of the brush. And so typically once you have shapes created, and I'm going to be on this wall layer here, and you want to paint, and you want to do some subtle painting, like airbrushing and different things, you want to bring your flow down too. And usually I'll bring the flow down to maybe 50. So I'll hold down the shift key and 5. So I got an opacity of 30 and a flow of 50. And I'm using this dissolve brush. And we'll just keep kind of painting here. Oh, the problem is I've got a selection. So let's do Command A, hit delete, Command D, so there's no selection. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. So let's sit back here. Okay. All right, so I'm fine. All right, so anyway, if we zoom in, you'll see what I'm talking about with this kind of pebbly texture, okay? And that's just using Dissolve. And, if we use white to paint with, you might see a little bit better here. And you just want to make sure your brush is big, okay? So when we do this, we could just take one swipe like this, and a couple of swipes like that, and we've got this lighter here, okay? I'm undoing everything for the moment, and just do one big one like this. Okay, there we go. Now, I like that. On the stripes layer, let's make them just a little lighter. So I'm going to lock the pixels. I'm going to use white here and just kind of do the same thing here, like that. Now, the other thing, too, is I want this to fade into, as it goes away here. Let's take a look at this here. I'll just zoom out here. Is that this, now you can either paint on top of this the same color as the background. Okay. But what I want to try to do is I want to erase out. So there's two ways to erase out. One is just erasing. We get an eraser, we erase out. That's a destructive way because it gets rid of the shape, and therefore if we need to come back and work on that again, that part of that shape is gone. But what we're going to do is a mask. You may know about masks already. So we're going to put a mask on this layer, and we're going to paint inside the mask with black, and that will actually do this. And see, this is kind of neat here. I like that because now whatever is underneath is showing through, and so it just sort of blends in there. Okay, so that's very simple. All right, so now let's go up to our clock body, And I want to do some shading on this, because if you take a look at this example, there's some shading. And yeah, I could just shade on top of the shape of the clock body, but the problem is that I want to overlap this other color going on down here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make a new layer, and we'll make the new layer somewhere. We'll make it up here, okay? And this will be for shadows. That. And then I'm going to make my brush smaller. I'm going to take off dissolve and just use normal, okay? I just wanted to show you that with dissolve, you get this pebbly texture, which is kind of cool. Anyway, what we're going to do is, before we paint, we're going to get the lasso tool. We're going to use the polygon lasso tool. And I'm going to select my area that I'm going to paint inside of, so I don't go past it like that. I might need to go back over again. Let me go back to my lasso tool and hit my shift key, because sometimes I may not be right on that line here. Okay. And when you use the polygon lasso tool, you always have to go back to where you started at. Okay, there we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paint here. And here's the deal. You got those dancing lines, those dotted lines, and those can get distracting. We can hide those by doing Command H. And Command H will hide your extras, and you may get something that pops up, a little menu that pops up, and you have to click OK. I've already done this so many times that it won't do that anymore. So anyway, I'm just going to paint in here, not with white, but with black. Now, typically I don't use black, but we're going to set this to multiply. I'm just making my brush, just trying to get the right flow and opacity. Okay, we might make a couple of swipes there. Now, I know I'm going outside there. Oh, that looks nice. I kind of like that. But what we're going to do is I'm going to continue on, then we're going to delete that stuff. Or we can make a mask out of this. And we're going to do that in just a second, actually. So now let's go and we'll keep the same layer, but we'll do Command D, or actually do Command H. Because a lot of times I'll hide my selection and I'll forget that I have a selection. But we're going to do Command D, and then we're going to go with my lasso tool. Let's zoom in here. And we're going to lasso this section up here. And go on down here. Looks like I'm going to have to hold down my shift key because it looks like I did not get on that line. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to paint again here. We're down here. And that's why I have this above everything. And we'll set this to multiply. And then we'll lower the opacity just a little bit. And if we need to paint one more time, we can. But, multiply will take a color and we'll add to it. And we can, now if it's at 100% there, it's going to be hard to see through things. That's why I lower the opacity there, okay? And there's other settings too. You could use color burn, darker color. Darker color looks nice too. But I'm just going to use multiply, okay? So anyway, we're going to hit Command D. If I'm going to make, on this shadow layer, if I'm going to make a mask, we can come down to our clock body layer. That's the color there. So that's the color for the clock body. And then we go back up to the shadow layer, and then we hit this little button here for mask, and boom, we make a mask, okay? And that works out very nicely there. I'm going to actually do the same thing here. Or actually, you know what? Since this is sitting and it's isolated, we could kind of just do something. So we'll just lock the pixels on this clock outer ring here. And I've got my brush here. We'll make it much smaller. And we're going to do, I'm going to raise my opacity up to 50 here. So it's a little bit, just take a swipe. I keep undoing until I like something. And yeah, I don't like that. You know, one of the things too I don't like is it's really fuzzy. And I'm trying to make a cast shadow from this little indentation here. Okay, this little shape here is actually coming forward. So let's go back to our brushes here and let's change our settings here. So first of all, on my brushes, one of the problems I have is I got shape dynamics. I'm going to take my shape dynamics off. So now it's just that way. Okay? Now, I'm going to change the hardness. So it's a little harder, a little sharper there. So now when I paint, we get something more like this. Almost. I want to do it all in one. That's why I keep undoing until I like it. The other thing too is that we could always go over to our, and rotate this thing. So we're at an angle. That works better, okay? We'll zoom in. The space bar is the grabber hand, so you can move things around here. And go back to our brush tool. And yeah, I like that. Okay, so that'll be nice. All right, so I want to change that. We go back over here, double click this so that it goes straight. I actually blocked out a blue color here. And I don't have blue showing up in there, but if you want to, you can just make a blue. Or you can come over and sample off of blue like this. Because what you can do is you can get your eyedropper, you can sample it. It shows up here. And then down in here, we're going to do new brush preset, and we'll call it blue. We call it anything we want to. And therefore, we got blue there. And so let's go back to all of our color here. I think we're right here. Yeah, okay. So that's where and like I said, I got all these files up. So we can go in and we can shade on the shoes. One of the things I want to do with the shoes is this. I got it situated so that I've got my shoe, and I call it nose. Okay, so this is what I've got set up here, just so you see, is the color for the nose and the eyes. I didn't write in shoe, nose, and eyes. I just wrote shoes and nose. They're all on one layer there, rather than having separate layers, because they're separated and they're easy to edit, okay? And the nose is a different color than the shoes, and the eye is a slightly different color from that blue, all right? But I want to go to the shoelaces and lock the pixels, and we're going to let's use that same airbrush. Let's see because it's a little harder. We're going to use white, and I'm just going to paint a little bit on the shoes here. Paint a little bit on that lace here. So it pops it out, okay? Let's go to the shoes and nose color. And if we don't have a color, we can always go in and just, one thing you could always do is you could pick a darker color, and then lower your opacity. Right now, my opacity is at 50. We'll bring it down to 20, let's say. So because you can use black and paint with it, and therefore, see, it looks like that. And that's why it's cool to use your opacity and flow, because therefore you can and we can do it like that. Okay. And I want to get in here. And I'm painting little areas here. And some of this is a little crude, but that gives you a general idea of what's going on here. The cast shadow. We'll lock the pixels on it. I could erase out, and I see there's a problem there. So here's the deal. If you are going to fix a shape there, if you lock the pixels, you can't fix the shape. And the reason why is because the pixels are locked. So let me go back and get a different brush here. I'll go to my brushes. We'll use a hard round brush. change the settings up to 100%, and so 0, and then so shift 0. So what it's doing when I hit shift 0 is it brings the flow up to 100%. By hitting the 0 key, it brings the opacity up to 100%. And therefore, I'm just going to sample this color and fix that little area right there. That was bugging me, okay? Then we can go back and unlock the pixels, okay? And therefore, we can lower the opacity back to 30, lower the flow, let's say to 40. Shift 4 will bring up 40. And we'll get our airbrush again, okay? And go to our brush settings, and it's gone back to the older brush settings, which is fine. Okay, it's got no hardness on it. And I'm just trying to enlarge the size here. There we go, because it can get pretty big. Sample off this color, the background for that, and just paint a little bit. Because here's the deal. With cast shadows, as they go back in space, as it goes away from the object that it's being cast from, they decrease in value, okay? So the darkest part is closer to the mouse. And also, cast shadows usually get a little broader, as they go out, but we're at an angle, so I just kind of keep it like this. But that works very well. The other thing, too, we could do is we could unlock the pixels on this cast shadow. Take the pixel lock off. And let's go over to, you see the smudge tool? There's the blur tool. And the blur tool, and this is one of the things I like about Photoshop is, you can blur things. I'm going to blur the edges on this, because that's the other thing that happens to a cast shadow, is the further it gets away from an object that's casting it, the blurrier it gets, okay? So it's really sharp near, where, where the shoes are at. It's really much sharper down there, but it's blurry up there, and that makes a much better cast shadow. I didn't even do it to this one. I should have done it to that one. And you see that mistake there? Just ignore that mistake, okay? So anyway, that's what we're going to do for that. Now, the last thing we got to do here is do the mouse. And what I say by doing the mouse is we want to do fur, okay? And one of the brushes we're going to use here is, let's go to our brushes. We got brushes and brush settings. In order to find a brush, it's better to go into here, into the brushes to find it. I have my concept art brushes loaded. Okay, and you can always collapse your brushes so you can see them better. I have brushes for trees, which we'll get into on another tutorial down the road. We'll talk about stuff like this. I'm just trying to collapse things. Okay. Oh, that's the triangle. That's all these sample brushes here. All right, so I got my manga brushes. I got my art brushes. Where's my concept art brushes? Maybe they're not loaded here. Here they are. All right, so concept art brushes, again, they're the Kyle brushes. And, if you go onto the website here, I think it's, let's see here. We go load more brushes. And you scroll all the way down here. You got to make sure you're logged in to download them. You will see you got art marker, concept art, okay, and this has all kinds of cool brushes. It's got rocks and flocks of birds and clouds and just all kinds of things here. Okay, I'm going to upload the concept art brushes with the manga brushes to our D2L, so that you won't have to do this. You could just download them from our D2L. Okay, so anyway, let's go back here. And we're looking for, and by the way, you can upload these brushes into Procreate. Okay? So all these Kyle brush, any Photoshop brush can be loaded into Procreate. It doesn't work the opposite way. You can't load Procreate brushes, as far as I know, into Photoshop. But what we're looking for is fur. We go all the way down here. I'm going to use the last fur brush here. Okay? We'll zoom in here. Let me get to my layers. All right, the mouse layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer here, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn this into create a clipping mask. So now it's going to use that mouse shape to clip with. It's similar to doing a mask. You know, it's a clipping mask. You know, so it's a little different than this kind of mask down here. And mind you, Procreate has a clipping mask also. Okay. And I like to do this rather than paint inside here because I want to paint this fur texture. But I may not like the color. I may want to adjust the color. So it'll be easier to adjust the color if it's on a separate layer. And so let me see what we got going on here. We got that. I'm not happy with that. So let's go to our brush settings to adjust that. Also, my flow and opacity is the flow is set at 40. We're going to bring the flow up over 70. We're going to blow up to 100% there. Okay, and let's go to our brush settings here and take transfer off. Okay, color dynamics we're going to take off, and we could. I'm not even going to do shape dynamics. I don't think here. Okay, we got smoothing. I might take that off. Let's see what it does here. Okay, shape dynamics. Yeah, we do need shape dynamics. Shape dynamics because we want to do the direction with pin pressure. Okay, that's very key there. So now it will do it according to kind of this, and it's still not doing exactly what I want it to do, but it's getting closer. Okay, just turn the angle jitter off. I'm making sure I go back to the, okay, there we go. And we'll make this brush just a little smaller. And we're going to give him a furry texture here, okay? And then I'm going to come in with a lighter brush and do the same thing. But the other thing I want to do too is, when I'm doing this, I like to erase out with this color, okay? So I'm going to take this color and I could make it a little darker too, but we'll do that afterwards. I'm going to zoom in here just to see what we've got here. Go back to my brush here. All right, so what I like about Procreate is when you switch to your eraser, you can pick any brush that you're painting with. It becomes your eraser. These Kyle brushes don't do the same thing in Photoshop. So we're going to have to trick it somehow. So I'm going to go, E key will bring up my eraser. And I'm going to come over to my brush settings. Okay. And I'm going to click on this and, yep, okay, I'm still on my brushes, okay. All right, so here's the deal. If I go to my brushes like this, and I hit the, it'll take me to basically a hard round brush. And then if I go all the way down here to the fur brushes, I'm looking for, I've got flame, there's fur. As soon as I click on the fur brush, or I'm on the E key, go back here, it switches right back from a eraser to a brush. Okay? Let's see, it just switched. I have no control over that. Well, in our brush settings here, let's go back to E. If we go and look for that fur brush over here, you'll just add it on there, okay? And therefore, I can erase out now that furry tech. And I like this look better because, I have a little bit more control over this. So let's say I wanted to change this color. I could lock the pixels and pick a darker color, and then, I could do it like this, and then come in here, and then maybe go into my color picker and make it a little darker like this, and do Alt Delete. All right, boom, we can do that. Or we could take this color like this, and we can make a hue and saturation layer that coincides with it. Now, first of all, before I did that, let me undo this here. You need to select the shape, and the way I'm selecting this fur shape is, and I'm going to deselect it, is you click on the icon of the layer. So if I wanted to, select the shoes and the nose, all like that, I hold down on my command key and it selects that. See, it selects all those shapes there. Well, I'm going to go do that for the fur. Then I come over down to here to this. This is my adjustment layers. And my adjustment layers I'm going to hit for hue and saturation. And it makes a hue and saturation layer with a mask. Okay? That's why you need to select it, because otherwise, if I did it without selecting that and I change the color settings here, it does it to the whole picture, okay? Or everything underneath that layer. So I'm just going to make this slightly darker. I could shift the color a little bit if I want to. I kind of like that color. So this is what I like using Photoshop for. But this, you got hue and saturation in Procreate, okay? But now I like that a lot better. The only thing is, it's not part of that clipping mask. So let's see if we could turn this into a clipping mask. There we go. Okay. So now that lower thing there, you can keep adding clipping masks in here. But if I go up here and do a layer and try to turn clipping mask on, it's going to be, that clipping mask is going to coincide with the layer below it. Okay. So I can keep adding clipping masks to the same mouse layer here, but they all have to coincide. They have to be all stacked on top. And this goes the same with Photoshop, okay? So let's go and do another layer above this hue and saturation layer, or even underneath it maybe. Maybe we'll do it from here, make a new layer. See, I selected the mouse layer, and then I hit plus sign for layer here, and boom, it creates that. And so now let's go and hit the brush again, and we're going to pick a lighter color of some sort, maybe this right here, and we're going to add some highlights to him. All right, flow on this brush, he has it set for 70. I say he because Kyle Webster, who designed the brush, set it for that. Okay, so I think what I'm going to have to do is, I'm undoing everything here, is I'm going to have to go back here and go back to my brush settings here and take off transfer again, take off smoothing, color dynamics. We can take off scatter if we want to, but I'm not going to. This is shape dynamics. Okay. I think that's the way I want it set here. But what I was going to do is I'm going to show you something. Let me see if this is what I'm looking for. It's not bad. Let me go. I'm going to pick this. Yeah, there you go. I like that. And then now, if I pick a color that's way dark like this, and I'm just checking here. Oh, here, direction. All right. So before I had it set to pin pressure, that's why it's kind of all jagged like that. I'm going to set this angle jitter to direction. So now it's going to do with that looks a lot better. Okay, I might even have to do the other thing. All right, so now I picked that lighter color, but it's so light. That's why now I want to lower the opacity to 30 on this. And I'm just going to put in some lighter color fur here, Now, what I would suggest doing is we can actually do a new brush preset, so we keep this, okay? And so that will be added. Let's see where it adds it at. It may add all the way down at the bottom of every single brush here. Sometimes that's what it'll do here. But it may have added it into here too. I'm just looking, where did it put that new brush setting here? Yeah, it added it right there. Okay, so that's the new brush setting there. Um, just wanted to see where it's located at because it's very important to know where your brushes are located at. Anyway, I'm just going to paint in here. We can also subtract out, remember? And just have some fun here, make him look furry. I might even redo the other layer here so it looks better. But, we zoom out, you'll see what I'm trying to go for here. We're going to hit the eraser key, okay? And I still got that set up so that, the last eraser I used had that furriness to it. So I like that, And make sure our shape dynamics is set for, let's set for direction also on that eraser. So we go back and forth between the brush and eraser. And this is when you're trying to build texture, that's the best thing to do, using multiple layers. And adding to it. Because after a while, if you just keep painting, it just all fills in and you can't see anything. You don't have any more texture because you've kept painting so much, okay? So I like that. That's not bad. This, I think I'm going to turn this off here. Well, actually, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to sample that color. Go up here to sample it because it'll pick up everything that the hue and saturation layer is doing. I'm going to turn these off. Now I'm going to make a new layer here. Like this. And go back to my brush. Make sure my brush settings are set for direction. There we go. And bring up the opacity up to 100%. Yeah, I like this better. Okay. And we can make that brush a little larger there for areas. There we go. So I'm trying to indicate like this where his knees are at, just to let you know. Because I've been looking at a lot of mouse art. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I wanted to draw a mouse. I was trying to figure out what to do for this exercise. And I was going, do I do Hansel and Gretel? Do I do Little Red Riding Hood since we're doing a children's story? And I said, I feel like drawing a mouse. And so I wanted to also have some architectural elements to it so I could show you about using the paths. And so that's why I put him on a clock. And just like the nursery rhyme, okay? So when the clock strikes one, he's supposed to run down the clock. And I'm just playing around until I get something I like. But see, that's much better this way. Okay, now I've got my brush settings set right. And to take a look at these brush settings, look at this right here. I turned off everything. I kept the scatter. The shape dynamics I set to direction. That's the key. So it does a good job on that. My opacity and flow are set at 100% so we get a nice, so we can see the texture going on there. And let's zoom out here and see what he looks like. And he doesn't look bad at all. Let's see what he compared to what he looks like over here. I mean, this one, when I'm not doing a tutorial, it's easier to work a lot of times. So this is generally what you want to do for this exercise. And what you're going to do in the end here is this. So once you get everything done, there's my all blocked out colors. We want to save this. And you should be saving as you go along. Your computer may be saving for you. Okay? You're going to name it your name. And we'll do, exercise 3 would be the easiest thing. You could also call it digital ink and color. Okay? I'm going to just do exercise 3 like that. Okay. And then we're saving it as a PSD file. So if you work in Procreate, you want to go to share and you want to share it, onto your desktop or wherever you're going to do it, and you name it, because you can name it when you're sharing it. And you share it and you do it as a PSD file. That is one thing that you can do. You can go between Photoshop and Procreate. So you could actually start the exercise in Procreate and come over to Photoshop if you want to, okay? Or vice versa, because Procreate will open PSD files. And so a lot of times I'll be working on something in Photoshop. I go, okay, I want to go and paint on it in Procreate. And then I just go and look for it. And then I import it in. And then I can paint on top of it. So let's hit save. And then let's go down here and let's get rid of layers that we don't need. Because we want to start collapsing layers. Because this thing can get very big here. First thing is you won't need your drawing layer anymore. Okay? So you want to delete that layer. We're going to keep the wall layer, the cloud, the stripes, okay? We're going to keep all these layers. Any layer we didn't use, like this layer here, that because you can make layers and experiment, we're going to get rid of, okay? There we go. And I'm going to see if there's anything else I want to get rid of here. Roman numerals and clock hand will keep separated. We've got the clock hand copy we'll keep separated. We've got the mouse and the line art. We could put the clock line art on top and just move these two together. So it's, so basically I'm going to hold down my Alt key. So let's see what we've got there. So that's my inking layer, okay? And I'm going to just turn these on one at a time. That's my clock hands. That's the shadow for the clock hands, okay? I didn't name it that, but that's the Roman numerals. That's the shoelace color. That's the shoes and nose. And these right here, as we turn them on here, because if you turn on one of these without turning on the mouse, you won't see it. And we just want to, I haven't painted in there. We can lock the pixels and use an airbrush to paint in on those. And I'm just seeing my layers here, okay? And these are the layers we need, okay? So in the end, you want to come in here. You want to paint on the tail, the ears, maybe even the nose. I didn't paint on my nose. I just left it a flat color. So you want to try to get it to look like that as closely as possible, okay? And you'll submit that exercise. We'll save it again to our D2L class.